Well, hi, Susan. It sure looks like this is a very formal design. Who drew up the plans for the garden?
A man by the name of Burton Fox drew the design. It is formal. It's an Italian Renaissance design.
So this has been maintained in the original form since it was laid down in the 30s.
Yes,
then.
yes, it has.
That's neat. It's hard to see. You don't see very many formal landscapes anymore,
No,
especially in Oklahoma.
Not in Oklahoma. You're right.
Well, with roses, gosh, it's a popular plant. A lot of people like to plant them. What are the basics, basic requirements?
Well, it's real important that you have good sunshine, at least 6 hours a day, preferably more.
Do they need clay soil or sandy soil?
It's best to have a good organic soil and one that's very well drained. Roses like a lot of water, but they want also to have dry feet at the same, so drainage.
A good combination.
Good combination.
I see. Well, I know it's confusing when people go to shop for roses in the spring. You see them and you see the nice picture on the package, but then you see the different classifications and all. How are they divided up or organized?
Well, basically, you have probably the most popular is the hybrid tea rose, and it normally sends up one bloom at a time on a long stem.
Okay, that's the one we see most often in the discount centers and places like that.
Yes, and that's the thing. You need to be sure that you buy roses from reputable people, because roses that you buy at the supermarket, you may get them to grow, but if you start with a healthy plant, then you're a lot more likely to have success.
Sure.
You don't have to do nearly so much to it to get it to thrive.
Well, now are all these along here the hybrid teas?
These are all hybrid teas, and on the left we have a floribunda, but first you might want to look and kind of see
This is
what we're talking about.
This is, I think, the classic color people think about when they think of roses.
Yes.
What's this variety?
This is Mr. Lincoln.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is, and it's also very fragrant, very fragrant rose.
So if people are looking for fragrance, Mr. Lincoln would be a good choice.
I think so. I think it's probably one of the top 10.
Now, how did Mr. Lincoln come to be? Is that
well, someone from OSU became a hybridizer, Mr. Swin, and he developed that.
So that's an Oklahoma rose variety,
That's right. That's right.
It's a very famous one, I know.
Yes,
known
famous
nationwide.
outside of Oklahoma as well.
Yes. Now, these are floribunda. What do you mean by that?
Okay, floribundas generally don't grow very high. You're not going to see them much taller than this, although there are some varieties that do get taller. But the main thing is that they come up and they have several blooms off of, I call it candelabrum, And as you can see, they tend to have more of a mass blooming effect than say
than an individual plant. Is this, with a floribunda, would you want to buy several and mass them together rather than have a single plant?
I think that's a better idea. Although you can have single plants. There are certain floribundas that are beautiful as just a specimen floribunda, where that you have blooms all the time, and you can use it as an accent.
I see.
It doesn't have to be in a group, but it works well that way.
I guess this would be a good time to mention that if you're planting roses, as with any landscape plant, you need to have a purpose in mind.
That's true. I think that someone should carefully think about roses before they put them in. See what they want them for. Do they want them to go against a fence, to hide something? I think that there are places for mini roses, but I think that usually is in a specific rose garden area. Right. Landscaping tends to be a little more difficult, I think, with roses, although it's done.
So they need to have a special place in the garden.
I think they have to have a special place, yes.
This is a nice one here. And what type is this?
Now, this is a grandiflora. Now, what the grandiflora does is it takes parentage from the hybrid tea and the floribunda, and you've got good qualities of both. Okay? The plants grow taller, and you also tend to have the candelabra effect that I was talking about earlier. Although that's not always true, as roses are hybridized more and more, you find out that the lines between certain ones
Starting to get a
closer
gray area.
and closer.
I
Yes,
see. Oh, they're very pretty.
they really are.
Now these look like they're a little bit shorter than the Mr. Lincolns we were looking at. Roses come in
Yes.
different heights.
The variety makes part of that decision for you, but they are, you know, we have roses that are as small as miniatures.
Oh, can we look at some
Yes,
of those?
miniatures are a good one.
Oh, these miniatures would make a great border.
I think they could be used in any small area too. That's one of the things we were talking about earlier. And they've really gained a lot of popularity in the last several years.
I can see why, because not everyone has a great big yard to devote to a rose garden. And could you plant these around a patio?
Oh, I think they're great around a patio, even in, you know, like pots around the patio. They're great for terrace gardening, you know. Maybe not so many of these here as they would be in New York. But
If we grew them in a container, would they be winter hardy?
with some protection they could be, but it would be actually be better if they were in a container to have a place you could bring them in.
I see. But they would grow in the ground outside in
Yes,
Oklahoma.
yes.
In the
I think they're one of the more hardy roses, in fact.
But with the miniatures, are we limited on colors that are available?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think the buds on the minis are really pretty
Oh,
too.
that's cute. I can just see that if you had a little a lunch or something on a small table, you could put one beside each plate.
Right, or you wear them on your lapel, little
Sure.
lapel. No, they're all colors.
Are they as fragrant as some of the other varieties of hybrid teas?
Sometimes you will find some that are fragrant more. They really don't have a fragrance that you would call a rose fragrance, you know, or what you would associate with a rose, but maybe a spicy smell.
Oh. Well, they sure are pretty.
Mhm.
Now, are there other roses besides the miniature roses that will stay low growing?
Yes, we have some polyanthus over here that are really nice little plants, that a real old variety of plant. This is,
Now, is it a different species or?
yes, polyantha is just another species of rose, and they don't all bloom like this. This is Margot Coster, and it tends to have little
Oh,
balls.
it's very different looking. It almost looks like a miniature peony blossom or something,
Yes.
the way it's balled up like that.
Yes.
Is the culture the same as for other
The
roses?
culture is the same, and again, it tends to be hardier, I think, than some of the others.
It's really different looking. That is pretty.
As long as you can give them enough sunshine and well-drained soil, you can do well with them.
Oh, that's great. Now, one type of rose I get confused about are the climbing roses. You see so many of those. How do we determine what's a climber, what's a rambler? Can you tell us about that?
Well, I can understand why you'd be a little bit confused on that whole subject. Basically, climbers are roses that have canes that are arching and need to be supported.
On a trellis?
On a trellis. Ramblers also have very long canes, up to 20 feet,
My goodness,
and
yeah.
they need support.
Okay, because when I think of a rambler rose, I think of a white rail fence and a little red flowering rose rambling
That's
along
right,
it.
and usually those little red roses are in clusters. That's another thing. A rambler usually has small clusters of flowers.
Okay, but a climber could be a hybrid tea?
Yes, and today most of them are.
So they are just trained to climb?
They're
They're
trained.
bred for that?
That's exactly, they are.
Okay.
The other thing is there are certain types of climbers that bloom only one time in the spring, and then you have repeating bloomers.
So if you want a climbing rose to give you flowers all summer long, you need to make sure what you're getting.
Yes,
Not all
you
of them will
do.
do that.
And that also it makes a difference in how you prune. You know, we've only been able to talk about the major rose groups today, and there are a number of other roses. And if people are interested, I think they need to know that they can go to a library and check out a book or check with a local rose society.
So they can learn about the other types that
Yes,
way. Yeah, it'd be
yes.
hard to cover all of
It's
them.
hard and gets confusing.
Now, Susan, I understand that roses are one of the most highly sprayed crops. They have a lot of insects and diseases.
Well, insect-wise, they have a problem with spider mites, and I think they, you know, in the fall, cucumber beetle, basically that's it. We only spray when we see a pest. We
That's a
don't
good
spray.
policy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And now we do spray to prevent fungus disease such as black spot or powdery mildew. And those are preventive sprays, and we have to do that once a week.
Okay, so it's the diseases that require a lot of...
Yes.
Are there any cultural things they can do to prevent those diseases?
Keeping your bushes as healthy as you can is going to keep that down. But
are there any... We always tell people to prevent diseases to use good sanitation in the garden.
That's real important. In the fall, after the roses have dropped their leaves, one of the things that you need to do, I think, is bring in a backpack blower or a rake and get all the old leaves out and make sure that you burn them or take them away, because that's going to breed a new crop of spores for the fungus for the next year.
Okay, so that would help prevent the black spot.
For the next year, yes.
Would keeping good spacing between the roses so you have good air
circulation. Air circulation is very important. That's can go into pruning and the direction that you prune your bushes. That's very important. But
I expect in eastern Oklahoma the diseases are more of a problem than in the western part of the state.
Because of the humidity. We have high humidity here, and that tends to create a lot more of the problem.
I imagine site selection would help too. If you select a part of the yard that does not have a lot of dead air space, maybe you'd have a little less trouble.
Yes, you would, or even raising your bed helps a little bit, you know.
Okay.
There are several things you can do, but the main thing is to keep a healthy bush, and you're less likely to have a problem with disease. But with roses, you're going to have to spray to prevent the fungus disease, at least in this part of Oklahoma.
Well, that's unfortunate, but it's something people need to realize and plan for.
And you need to do it. You need to be consistent. You need to start as soon as the leaves start to emerge and go through until the first hard freeze.
Well, I expect those fungicide sprays are as a preventive.
It's preventive. It does not cure the disease once
so
it gets there.
You've got to keep a protective coating on there.
Another thing I would bring up, here it's impossible for us to do, but if a homeowner has a little bit of black spot on their roses, and usually it starts on the lower leaves, I would pick the leaves off and take them away.
Sure,
that might help, you know, because I think you should spray only when you have to.
Well, that makes sense to me. Well, so far as keeping the roses healthy, I see you've got some mulch here.
Yes.
We preach a lot about putting mulch around plants because it moderates the soil temperature, but what kind of mulches are best for roses?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, I think, but what we've got here are bark chips, and they're a really good source of mulch, but you do have to compensate on your fertilizer a little bit with nitrogen, because as they break down, they tend to draw a little nitrogen out of the soil. Leaves, oak leaves are real good. Cottonseed hulls.
Sure, pecan shells, I guess would work too. I guess the main point is to keep a mulch on there no matter what you use.
Yes, the mulch is very, very important, especially in Oklahoma where you have these high heats and you need to retain that moisture in the soil.
Okay. How do you water this garden?
Well, we have a system where we insert a pole type thing that has an irrigation head on it.
And you do overhead irrigation?
We do overhead irrigation.
Is that how most gardeners should water their roses? In a home situation?
In a home situation, I think if it's at all possible, I would drip irrigate or not go on top of the foliage, mainly because if you water at the wrong time of day, it can create some problems. And you can get a better soaking, I think, just by going directly on the soil. That's not, at this time, a feasible way for us to do it, so we overhead water. Now, one of the advantages of overhead watering is that it controls one of the pests I mentioned, spider mites.
Sure.
It tends to keep the populations down.
Because they love hot, dry conditions. I can see how
they do.
A shower would help them.
It does.
Well, Susan, if we were starting a rose bed, where would we begin? Is there a bed that you're just beginning to dig out?
Yes, there is. I'd like to show it to you.
Okay, let's go look at that. Well, Susan, it looks like you've got a bed all lined out here.
Yes, we're getting ready to plant a new bed of roses, and we've killed out everything, the grass and the weeds, and we're getting ready to add organic materials and till it in and let it sit until we're ready to plant.
How much organic material do you put in with the soil, percentage-wise? Try to have it be half and half, or put an inch on?
It's close to half and half probably. We like real organic soil.
Well, that helps a lot.
It does.
Moisture retention and drainage at the same time. Do you put fertilizer in before you plant?
No, we only fertilize during the growing season.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When do you plant roses? What's the best time of year?
For our area, January, February is
Really,
the best
that
time.
early?
Yes, and you're planting bare root roses.
Okay. So if you are in the grocery store in March and they've got roses that are already leafing out, you wouldn't want to buy those.
I personally wouldn't want to buy them.
Wait till
I would
next year.
definitely go to a reputable person to buy my roses from.
I see. When do you prune roses?
The best time to prune them is in the spring when they're coming out of their dormancy, and you prune off all of the dead and maybe shape the bush a little bit. And then during the growing season, you just want to take off your old blooms, and you go down to like a 5 leaflet.
Okay, so down to a leaflet that has
Right,
5 leaflets like that.
And you make a slanting cut and
Okay.
remove that. You also want to do it so it's to the outside of the bush, so you're directing the growth in that manner.
Going into wintertime, do we have to give them any special protection?
If you have roses that are not winter hardy, which we have some and we know which ones they are, we come in with soil from the outside and we mound it up around the bush about 8 to 10 inches, which covers the bud graft.
That's what you want to protect.
That's
in
what
the
you want to
wintertime.
protect, yes.
You see a lot of rose bushes, I guess, that blast out from the bottom and have just a little bitty red flower left over. Oh, this has really been informative. I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this information with us, Susan. And I see Joe is over in the test garden with his clipboard. I'm going to go visit with him.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.